Alright, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in. What we're doing today is we're going to play Attack of the 50-Foot Colossi. I don't think we'll do an entire game. We'll probably play just a couple of turns to give you an idea of how the game plays. When I started, I thought it would be kind of complicated, but after reading through the rules and playing, it's actually a pretty good, easy solo game. I have some glare here. I've been fiddling with the lamps trying to get the glare off, and it didn't work out so good. So please excuse some of the glare. As needed, we'll be able to zoom in, and we can probably take a look at things that end up over there. So the first thing that we're going to do is make sure I got some dice set aside. So I've got here 4 6-sided dice. Yeah, this is probably... I probably need two more, and I don't have more of the small dice, but I'm going to grab a couple of these. So 6 dice is probably about the most that you really need to play that I've encountered so far. So the game doesn't come with any, but if you've got 6 dice laying around, then you should be fine. Now, we also got to set up, because there's 2 scenarios and then there's a campaign. We're going to do scenario number 1. Now, I have here a little bit of the setup already done. So this is on map A, which is labeled over here, map zone alpha. So that'd be the first map. I then put my game turn tracker up here for game turn 1. And then you also have this nice handy chart which tells you all the steps that you have. So all the Marine steps and then all the Colossi steps, which is great because we'll use that. It's about 12 turns and there's about like 10 or so steps, but we'll walk through. It's actually not that complicated. It just looks like a lot of phases each turn, but they go pretty quickly. So what we'll do then is talk about the setup. Now, the setup of the map, you're going to have your mine boss, and he's going to start here in the mine barracks, the miner barracks. You then have some trapped miners that are here. Now, to go through the whole game, part of the win conditions is if you get these miners untrapped, they can flee, and they're going to want to flee off this south edge here, and that's where these arrows are located. So they would just have to run from up there down there. Now the mine boss, what he can do, talking about setup and strategy, he has to either, well, he doesn't have to, but he could move onto the stack of trapped miners, and then for his turns over time, he can start to untrap them, which would mean we would then flip them over, and then they would be eligible to act during the Marine turn, and then they could run south off the board. Or the mine boss, if you get him up north to this corporate office, he can then flip into a major, because it turns out that that mine boss is actually like a war hero. So if you get him up to that office, you can flip him over to his commander side, and then he has this cool lag gun which he can use to push targets away, which actually can be useful, because if you have everything just positioned just right, you theoretically could have your boss somewhere on the map, who's now a major, can use a lag gun to push miners south to aid them in escaping from the Colossi, or you can coordinate his efforts to push Colossi away from units, right? So that's kind of a neat thing. Even though it's a solo game, you still have a lot of choices to make as a player. So you're not following a script necessarily. You're actually got a lot of choices as the Marines. Now the Colossi, they have a script which is baked into your turn chart. So they have a little AI that they'll follow, which we'll cover. And so the initial setup then is going to be putting your mine boss, your miners, and then they also have a tram up here that you would place. You also then have to place some of your Colossi, the rock stone creatures, and they'll be, you have a redstone one that you place down here, and then I think the red one you place up here. Then we're going to look at the actual scenario setup just to make sure I've got that first part done, because Marines don't initially start on the board. Alright, so that's a little bit about the background. Let's take a look at the actual scenario then, and then finish the setup and start playing. Alright, so here's the scenario we're doing. So we're actually doing scenario number 1. That's section 10 of the book. This is on page 15. Now it says a serious accident on Graviton Prime causes a collapse and an explosion at the main mine, injuring some unseen nearby Colossi children, which are known as pebbles to the locals. And it also traps the IMC miners. So the mine boss escaped injury and sends out an immediate galactic 911 call from the barracks. Soon after the call goes out, several infuriated Colossi tribes break the surface of the planet and begin attacking the mine colony. In the meantime, the old reprobates answer the call and begin an emergency deployment to the planet. So this scenario is going to be played over 12 game turns, and it uses Map Zone Alpha. So the first thing we're going to do in the setup is our chit cup setup. So you have, it's like 14, I think, random event chits that you can put in a cup. Now it says here you need to place the Rock Garden of the Gods and Honoring Our Ancestors event chits in the cup. So those two are going to be in there. Then randomly draw 11 more event chits and place them into the cup. So we're going to have a total then of 13. There's 12 turns. The reason there's 13 over 12 turns is there's like a tectonic event that causes like an earthquake where you draw a secondary event. So we're going to have one more event just in case we draw that one. Alright, so I'm going to take care of that chit cup real quick. Now that the chit cup is set up, so I've got the 2 that were required and then 11 random, we would then set up the Marines. So the Marines are what I initially set, the Mine Boss, the Miners, and the Ore Carrier. Then we have the Colossi set up. And I was wrong, it's not the Brownstone, it's the Blackstone. So we set up the Redstone, we set up the Blackstones, and they set up both here along the southern part of the map. Now I gotta place 2 random. Now there's actually 3 more. There's like, well, you have your tombstones, you also have gray stones and yellow stones, brown stones, white stones. So what you can do to randomly determine the next 2 is you could say take one color of the remaining tribes, kind of mix those up, and randomly grab, you know, two of the tribes that you're going to use. I already kind of determined which ones it's going to be, so I ended up with brownstone and whitestone tribes. Those will place on the board. Now the way you place them on the board is you're going to roll 3 dice. Now the map is very cleverly set up to where this represents 3 dice that you could roll. So like if I roll my dice here, for example, and line them up, this is actually a grid number on the map. So if I rolled 663, 663 is actually on the map right here. So the grid is all set up in just a way that you'll actually see a couple blank hexes that don't have any number in it, and that's just part of helping to align the numbering system with 3 dice. So to place those white Colossi and the brown Colossi, what I do is, because if you roll 3 dice, sometimes they land kind of jumbled up and it's hard to tell what it should be. I just kind of roll 1 dice 3 times and get my grid. So we'll place the brownstones first. So they're going to be in a 6, 3, 5. So that's going to be in grid 635, which is right, if I can pick all 3 up. Now your Colossi stacks come with several counters. Some have 3 counters, some have 5, and that just kind of represents their overall strength, because I mean they're 50 feet tall, right? So this one was what, 635, which is right here at the topmost edge of the map, right there. And what you do is you just arrange randomly those counters that make up the stack. So I just kind of shuffle them up a little bit. Not much of a shuffle, but kind of mix it up. And then I can determine the placement. Most of those pieces all have the same strength, but there's usually one in there that's kind of weaker. Some of these it's all the same, a little stronger. Alright, so this next one, I'm rolling some dice. Let's see what we get here. So this last one, the white stone, is going to be in grid 430, 434, which is right up here. Again, that's near the top. Boom. So the Colossi have been placed. Alright, that's great. Now there's a couple special rules. It says there's a Colossi garrison. So at the moment that a Colossi unit leaves any building hex, because sometimes as it's chasing people down, it might run through a building. So with the special rule, they're going to leave behind a gravel, which we'll learn more about gravel as we play. When they leave behind the gravel, it does not lose a counter. Sometimes these rock formations, the Colossi, will either like suffer damage or an event that will knock a piece of the Colossi off, but it forms a gravel pile. And that's kind of good and bad because it makes the Colossi weaker, easier to kill, but those gravel piles can sometimes turn into something bad. But this particular event going on means they can turn buildings that they run through into gravel, but they don't lose any of their being. So, I mean, that's an important consideration. So it kind of sucks that they would make gravel but not take damage. So it is what it is. And then it says for all Marines, they are scheduled. You can't delay when they arrive. So if the Marines are scheduled to arrive on a certain turn, they need to arrive. Then it had some special rules for the miners. So if you move like a unit onto the miners, basically the miners cannot be affected in this state. It's like they're not part of the game because they're trapped underground. So you actually have to use a turn. It says here one miner unit can be released each turn as long as a non-stun, paralyzed, spec ops, heavy weapons, boring bit, or HQ unit only spends its entire turn in the hex and does nothing else. So only certain units can free the miners. So I can't use like a regular Marine. Then it has rules for the mine boss where he becomes the major and then he gets his special weapon. And then your book here at the very end does a nice job. It gives you a victory points chart. So at the end you can tally up how you did. That way, you know, if you play a scenario more than once, you can see how your victory points stack up. So let's go ahead then and talk about the phases of the game, because now we're set up. We are ready to play. And that's where this handy dandy turn chart comes in. So we're going to start on turn 1. And the first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to leave this off to the side. That way you can read the event as we go down. So first things first, we're going to draw an event chit. Alright, so it's almost cheating in a way because I can see the cup through the camera, but I'm going to stick my hand, my big hand covers everything. Shuffle them up a little bit, and we draw this one. So we have here an event. We draw Rock Garden of the Gods. Oh, and as you see, it's for scenario 1 only. Great. That doesn't sound good. Let's see what that is. Well, as we guessed, Rock Garden of the Gods has nothing to do with like a rock concert. What it says is, if you have any gravel units out on the map, so what is that? Well, we mentioned that you might bust off part of a Colossi. Well, then that will leave behind these gravel chits. On the back of each of these gravel, because these are actually kind of like little sentient beings, there's an event on the back of the gravel. So there's a part of the game where we actually will morph these, flip them over, and reveal what their hidden side is. Now, luckily, Rock Garden of the Gods says we would flip. It says flip any. All gravel units are immediately flipped to their morph side. Okay, so the planet, there's a description in the game where like the planet kind of is alive with the rocks. So when they get disturbed, they come to life, become the Colossi. Well, the little gravel pits can also come alive and do something. So the god of the planet, or whatever you want to call it, has awoken all of that. But this start of the game, there was no gravel. However, the bad thing is, it says if there's like if there's no miners or civilians, and it doesn't count the trapped one. So if there's no miners or civilians on the mine entrance, it says if the mine entrance hex is currently unoccupied, other than trap, then you randomly select a Colossi tribe and you'll put that on the mine entrance. So all I have left, it says not the tombstone one, so we have gray stone and yellow. I'm just going to grab gray stone. At this point it doesn't matter. That's bad. That is terrible. That's probably one of the worst ones you could draw at the start of a game. So that goes right there on top of the mine entrance. Alright, so that was the event. So what do we have left to do now? Well, now, according to the turn track, well, not the turn tracker, but the phase marker, we get to do marine recovery. Now, if one of these civilians had become injured during any of this, we could rally them to see if they, can flip from healthy or damaged or stunned, but there's nobody on the board that needs that. Now we're going to do marine reinforcement. Alright, so let's see what's going on with the Marines. Alright, so we're checking for reinforcement. So according to turn 1, we're going to get a scout unit, yay, and we get 4 Marines. Now the way that these place is you're going to roll, and we have a chart that we check, and that tells us where they land. Well, we pick a spot on the map where we would like them to land, but then the chart is going to tell us where they actually land. Okay, so let's look at the map, and then we'll see where we might want to place some folks. When we're looking at the map, there's actually quite a few options here as far as placing the Marines. We have 2 Colossi up here in the north. We have the one that appeared here at the mine entrance, and then we start with the 2 that place down here. The only thing is, I know that with the black stone, it has an attack. It's a fault trimmer, so they essentially will end up traveling. So if I drop the Marines here, they might get like 1 attack, but this thing will travel, and then it'll be anywhere on the map, and we'll have to end up moving somewhere else. Another thing is, if I drop the Marines down here to fight the red Colossi, the redstone, this thing is tough. It is very strong, and it has essentially two attacks. So it's got 2 special attacks, which it will do no matter what. It's just that one of them is kind of a real pain. So all of these are terrible options, because if I start up here, I mean that's like surrounding the Marines potentially by 3 Colossi units. What we could do, I'm thinking, is maybe kind of drop out here into some of these areas, and then we can see if we can shoot up and maybe attack maybe the Whitestone Colossi, mostly because Marine weapons have an unlimited range, so they're fine. They're just gonna shoot. So if I land out here in the open areas, I might be able to shoot and hit up here into the Whitestone if they land well. So that might be something that I look at. Well, what I've decided, just kind of looking things over, is we're going to try and land here in this open area and see if we can attack up here to the White Colossi. Now, landing isn't that difficult, but it is a little tricky. What you have to do is pick a hex where you want to land. Then what you do is you roll a number of dice equal to the last number in that hex. So for example, if I want to drop a unit here, I'm going to roll 4 dice. I then consult a drop chart, which will let us know if they successfully land. For example, I'm going to go ahead and try to drop a Marine unit here in hex 314. Now I know that that's going to be 4 dice at a roll, so I'm going to set 4 dice in my cup, and then I roll the dice and compare that number with the chart. Alright, so here's the first dice roll. Now I'm going to take out of all of those the highest result and compare it to the drop zone chart. Alright, I call it a drop zone, but it's a landing zone procedure. So I rolled a 6. Now the 6 says safe landing. Place the Marine unit in its destination hex. It may not move further, but may conduct combat. So great. I know that that unit is good to go. Then I got to repeat the process for each additional unit. Oh, lucky, we scored another 6, so that troop also landed safely. And I'll go ahead and repeat this for the next couple so you don't have to watch all of that. Well, there's the dice result for the last drop troop. Everybody rolled at least a 6. So the strategy behind this then is when you're looking at your map, you want to try and get then hexes that have a high number. So the only odd person out here was 244. Rolled 4 dice, but still rolled really well. This kind of gives you a little bit of planning ahead because, you know, based on where the Colossi are and how the game progresses, you might start running out of high numbered hexes, so you might have to roll like a 3 dice, maybe 2 dice. Luckily, this was 4, 5, and 6 right through this group. They landed great. And he was 4, so that was perfect. So the Marines have landed. They can't attack, or I mean they can't move, but they can attack. Alright, so now let's take a look at our chart, because now we've done Marine recovery and they've landed. Alright, they have arrived on their scheduled reinforcements. Now we take a look at the Marines are gonna do. Now I did place a Marine down here because I did get my scout and my 4, and I forgot to mention he was in 336. So what I want to do now is go ahead and make their attack rolls. So I'm going to look to see what's available. Now it's real important that you try to focus your fire on one Colossi stack at a time, because the way the combat results work, and we'll discuss that, it doesn't usually work in the favor of the Marines. They have to put a lot of firepower on a Colossi to really bring it down. So what I've decided to do is, I mean, I could have gone with either the Greystones here at the entrance, but I'm actually going to go ahead and attack up here. Let's see, where's the entrance ones? I could have done this stack, but I'm actually going to shoot at this stack. And the reason why is because this is only a stack of 3. If we're super lucky, we might be able to take this down in a couple of turns. If we're not lucky, well, it's a good thing I'm only playing for a couple of turns to show you this. So how does combat work? Well, you're going to do 1 unit at a time. So you pick a squad, and you're going to look at your combat value. So what you have here, this arrow is movement, this is their defense, and this oval looking shape, that's their attack number. So this unit, in case you can't see it very well, this has 4. So he's going to roll 4 attack dice. I say he, but it means they, men or women. It's just a group, it's not a singular person. Now you look at your top stack of your Colossi. Now remember, we randomly put these hex or these counters together, so this is the top one. And the stats are very similar. It has a defense, has an attack. So essentially what you'll do is roll your dice, which the Marine squad rolls 4 because of its attack strength, and then you compare every dice you rolled against the shield number here, which is a 4. So I hit on a 4, 5, and 6. Now there are some modifiers to combat. There's line of sight, shooting through friendly units, shooting through building hexes. You reduce your combat factor by 1. Also, you can get affected by your combat factor if you land in this turn. So this turn, all my Marines, instead of fighting with 4 attack factor, they're going to attack with 3. So let's roll some dice. I'm going to start with this squad here, and let's see what happens. The Colossi's number to hit is a 4, so let's just drop our 3 dice. Now, I scored 2 hits. Okay, that's not terrible. The Colossi are actually really strong. When you only get 1 or 2 hits, which we actually have a combat chart that we can look at, and what it tells me is that you place a chipped marker. Now this chip marker, it adds a -1 to their defensive number. So this white Colossi up here, instead of being a 3, any additional fire against it is going to turn to, I mean it's a 4, but this will make it a 3. This is important because if you stop shooting at the Colossi, like it's the end of your turn, or you shoot at another target, then what happens is you lose that -1 bonus. Actually, you want that, because see, now when the next unit attacks, they're going to have they're going to have to beat a score of 3. Now that will come off also where if I do enough damage to reduce part of the Colossi, I'll lose that chipped effect as well. So that chipped effect only affects the top layer it's attached to, and only until one of those conditions is met. What we're going to do now is take a look at the next Marine unit. So since this unit fire, what I do is I just rotate it to let me know it's acted. This next unit is going to shoot. This rubble pile does not affect line of sight or combat effectiveness, so it has like a movement penalty, but I'm going to go ahead and just shoot. So we'll also roll combat results for this Marine squad too. So I'll roll for this one, then I'll roll for that one because my roll dish will cover it. And then also I have this Marine unit down here. They will shoot as well. So for this particular turn, all 4 Marine units will shoot up here, and we'll just kind of see how the combat results go. Alright, so the second in line rolls his 3 dice, or their 3 dice, and I needed a 3. So with only 2 hits, that chip marker remains. Okay, then I had the third in line. Well, and then also, so excess hits are lost too. So if, let's say I got to roll like 6 dice on the attack, and that would be great, then I lose excess hits beyond 3. So let's say I had like 6 actual hits, I still only reduce the rubble pile on the Colossi 1 at a time. So basically the magic number is 3. Alright, so this is the third unit. Whoops. Well, it popped out, but we have a 5, 5, and a 3. So that means we lose the chip. Alright, so we chipped it, but the stack, which we can't see, let me just move the cup a little bit. I can now actually flip this over, because he is now wounded, and it's a 3-3. So it's already a little bit weaker. Now if I chip that, I would put the chipped on it, and then it would need a 2, right? But I only got 1 unit left to shoot. So I'm going to shoot my last Marine unit at a strength of 3. That 2 is not helpful. So it's chipped. So we're going to put a chip on it again. Alright, so I have to think about this for a second. Let's look at the map. Alright, some of you may remember we did drop a scout unit here, and it has an attack value of 3. But the problem is, it also suffers a -1 to its combat factor for dropping. So the most dice that it can roll is 2. So even if I attacked the Colossi and scored 2 hits on 2 dice, that would still just be a chipped result. That's not enough to do anything. So I actually have another option that I can do with my scout that we'll talk about. Now, lucky us, the scouts actually have a recon ability, and this is actually super useful. What you do is you're going to roll 1 die 6, and if you get a result of 4 or more, you successfully recon. Now that is modified for like landing, or if you're stunned, or if you have like some headquarters units, this modifier can go up and down. Now I landed this turn, and so it says here, if disrupted landing zone procedure, if it's disrupted or entered by the landing zone procedure. Okay, so that's going to be, I have to subtract 1 from the roll. So instead of being a successful scout on a 4, 5, or 6, we're going to get a successful scout roll on a 5 or 6. So there's our dice cup. Let's roll. So the scout, oh, not even close. All right. So what I would do is I would rotate my scout just to let me know that, yeah, everybody has done something. So what we had on that first turn of Marines landed in. They landed all successfully, rolled really well for that. Scout was not able to pull in a successful recon. What does the recon do if you get that? What happens is you place a icon, or this counter, you place it on the very next turn of the turn track. When the turn track advances and you do the event phase, you actually get to draw 2 event markers and pick the one that you like. They're not always good. So sometimes it's a matter of picking the one that's less harmful, right? So pick those. and that's what you would want that for. That didn't work out this turn. So now that the Marines are done, let's see what the Colossi are up to. After the Marines have finished, we're going to move down to Aura of Ascension. Now, this is where if I had some of the gravel piles that get blown off of the Colossi, I could check to see if one comes alive. Basically, you just pick one and you flip it to its other side to see what the effect is. But there's no gravel on here that I can flip. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the Aura of our Ancestors, so that's lucky. Now we're going to draw control order of action card. And that's kind of what determines which Colossi does what first, which group. So let's take a look at the cards. The way this works is very simple. You just take the top card of the deck, flip it over, and then it tells you the order in which things act. For this particular scenario, there are no Tombstone Colossi, so we don't have to worry about that. I have no Yellowstones, but I do have the Redstone Colossi. So the Colossi follow a very simple AI. They move towards the closest Marine or civilian unit. If they get adjacent to a unit, or if they start adjacent, they then attack. If they are able to attack or don't attack, after the attack is done, they then have special attacks that they do, and each stack has an attack. So let's take a look at the Colossi and see what happens. So we got to remember, Redstone first. So we've got my Redstone Colossi here, and what I want to do then is determine what units are the closest. So I would count hex-wise. Let's see if I can rotate the camera enough so you can see with me here. So if I go like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Up here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've actually got 2 units that are equal distance. And, you know, if I was to come up around here, I mean, they can go over the mountains. The Colossi just costs 1 movement point to go over a hill. So they're part of the mountains, right? So it's an equal distance. On the card, it'll tell you at the bottom, how do you break a tiebreaker? So if you have multiple units that meet a requirement like distance, find the lowest number hex. It's pretty, well, you know, it's pretty rare that you're going to find 2 hexes that have the same numbers, because you're always going to be like a 362 is low or higher than 336. So it pretty much is a tiebreaker. So this is hex 336, and that's hex 244. So it's not like the last number of the hex, it's the hex number. This number here, 244, is lower. So these guys are going to move towards him. Now, problem with that. The rules say when the redstone leaves a building area, they kind of crumple it, and then they're going to leave a gravel marker behind. Now that doesn't say that the entire structure is destroyed and you can't use it. The rules don't say that. It just like it destroys part of the structure. But yeah, that's a pain. Once that leaves that building, then I'm going to have gravel on the map. So that's terrible. Alright, so the Colossi moved. He's not adjacent to anything, so he can't attack, but he gets his 2 special attacks. So the first one he has is MS, and then he has PE. Those, unfortunately, are not on the player aid card that comes with the game, so you have to look those up inside the rule book. So let's take a look at what they do. Now, the Redstone Colossi has 2 attacks. It's got MS for Medusa Stare, and then it has FE. We'll take a look. It's an eruption, not fungi. It's like a formation explosion. Anyway, what you do for the Medusa Stare, the procedure, it turns randomly and it shoots a stare off in some direction that will determine it random. So the Medusa Stare sometimes can be horrible or work in our advantage. It doesn't do anything. So the procedure is I roll 1 die, compare it to the map compass, that gives me the direction that it shoots. Then I draw a straight line through the hexes that it shoots through. And basically the closest Marine civilian unit located in that path and within line of sight of the Colossi is paralyzed. So if it's already stunned or paralyzed, it then gets disrupted. Now it says for every other unit located in the hex, and, of course there's an and, it's very devastating, and within line of sight, it is stunned. Alright, so the first unit gets paralyzed, and then everything else in the path can get stunned. And then it says if it's already paralyzed, like if it's already stunned and it gets stunned again, it becomes paralyzed, and if it's paralyzed when it gets stunned, it becomes disrupted. So this potentially can ruin a lot of Marines. Then we'll take a look at the next one, which is, oh, it's not FE, it's PE, and that's the pumice ejection. All right, so that would be the second attack for the Redstones. So let's first of all determine what Medusa's Stare does. Okay, so there's the compass. I'm going to roll a die 6. That's a 1. Well, hopefully that's not too bad. So a 1 is straight north. Alright, what does that affect? Alright, we rolled a 1, so that means the Medusa's Stare shoots straight north, and then it hits a hill. Luckily, this blocks line of sight from the Colossi to the scout unit, which is just right there. Great, so that didn't work out the way they wanted. So now we got to look at the PE, right? Pumice ejection. So essentially, it says here the volcanic Colossi periodically shoots off a huge chunk of red hot pumice. It apologizes loudly, but just can't help itself. So it either burp, fart, whatever. So what you do is, after you do the Medusa's Stare, on odd numbered game turns, so this is turn 1, so we're actually going to do this. You're going to follow this procedure for ejecting rock, but the difference is, because this is a ability, it says no ill effect, which means it won't suffer a reduction. So let's see what happens. So the way the pumice ejection works is I roll 1 die, that determines the direction. So we're going to roll a dice. It's going to go north. Then I roll the die 6 again, and it's actually going to be a die 3. So a 1 or a 2, it's 1 hex. 2 or 3, it's 2. 3 or 4, it's 2 hexes. 5 or 6, it shoots out 3 hexes, unless it hits something intervening. So I rolled 2. So it's going to shoot off one of those gravels, 1 hex. I have a stack of gravel over here to the side, so I'm just going to grab the first one off the stack, and it shoots it right up there. And that's a problem, because now there's one of these gravels. That means the next turn, when we get to the aura of the Ascension, this, if there's not any more placed at the end of this, then that will essentially flip, and then we'll have some sort of bad effect. But the redstone is done. With the fact that I drew 1 more Colossi, the game normally runs with only 4 Colossi on the board. I have 4 more now. Instead of having just 3 more to run, I've got 3 plus the one that we drew at the beginning. It says here on my activation card that we drew earlier, we didn't have yellow, we had red. Do we have gray stones? We do. Gray stone, that's the one that got placed on the mining entrance. And bad news for the miner. Now, when we did the Marine phase, I kind of actually really forgot all about him. He has no combat, but if I wanted him to turn into the Major, I have to run all the way up to the corporate office. So I wasted a turn. He has 3 movement points. So the bad thing is, the gray stone here, let's focus the camera more centrally to the action. Because I did not move the miner boss, the Greystone Colossi is going to move down 1. I mean, I could have chose 464, but look, I can look at the card. It says lowest numbered hex. So 524 is actually a higher number than 464. So the Colossi here, as I struggle to move these counter stacks, are not my friend. I'm going to place them here, because that's the lower number hex. That's the direction of travel for the Colossi. And now, because he's adjacent to the miner, he attacks the miner. Now this works out. You can see how these things attack. What you do is you look at your attack value. It starts with 4. So I have 4 dice for the Colossi. When they're adjacent, well, here's something. The rules don't say that when a Colossi is adjacent, that it gets an extra combat factor. Instead, where they get their extra combat factors is by how many additional, I don't know if you want to call them boulders, but how many more units they have in their stack. Because remember, these Colossi are made up of like these big living boulder organism things, and so it has 3 more. Great, so it's already got the 4, and then I'm going to add 3 more. I'm going to need 1 more dice to roll this result. Alright, I found another dice here. Yeah, I had white dice earlier, but I found my consistently colored orangish red dice. So I've got 7. Now, how much damage do we do? Well, the Mind Boss has a defense of 3. My Colossi is rolling 7 dice. Every result of a 3 or higher is damage to this miner. He might not live, so I probably started off really, really bad by not moving the miner. Let's see. Oh, that's very fortunate. So we only have 2 hits, the 4 and the 3. So they go to stunned, then they go to paralyzed, and then they would flip to a reduced side. This guy doesn't have a reduced side. Basically, if I killed the boss, he's gone because he doesn't have a flip side. But I do have a handy dandy stunned, paralyzed marker. So that's actually very, very fortunate. So there you go, Colossi, take that. So after the gray stones move, the white stones move. And the white stones, if you remember, are just right up here. I'm going to kick this off to the side for a second. And check it out. They're not going to move towards the miner machine because there's no troops in it. So they're going to move this way. Now, if I remember, they should be here. I probably bumped them since we started. Is that on the reduced side? Oh yeah, I did reduce it once. And then I think the reduced side got chipped at some point, but I took the chip off because we've passed that combat. Now remember, my card says lowest number hex. Plus this unit right here is the closest, so I mean, I don't think I need the card to tell me lowest. He's just going to move in a straight line towards those Marines. So that's one advantage that the Marines have. The Colossi, unless there's the like low gravity event in play, they move 1 hex. With the low gravity event, they move 2. So your Marines, if they take advantage of their long distance firepower, they get several turns of shooting at the Colossi as they move. So use that to your advantage. That's why sometimes it's not bad to deploy kind of on the far side of the map if you can position your Marines to where they have line of sight. Now if they move, which they're going to have to at some point, they then suffer -1 to their combat factor, but that might help keep them out of combat range, especially as they start to get encircled. I've got the white stones, the gray stones, the black stones. They're all here, and it's terrible. But I did forget to do something. Oh, what did you forget to do? Well, I forgot the special attack of the gray stones, and then I got to do the special attack of the white stones. So I tell you what, let's do the white stone special attack, and then we'll go back and do the gray stone special attack. Yeah, there's always something you forget. First of all, the white stone special attack is BS. Yep, this is a bunch of BS. Alright, so the white stones have a boulder sling. So basically they just carry like a bunch of rocks in like a huge bag or something over their shoulder, and they throw these rocks. And they're going to pick a unit that's closest to them within 5 hexes, and then they initiate an attack. The nice thing about this attack is they don't get a bonus combat factor for having the additional boulders in their stack. So it's just, in this case, will be a 3 because it's been reduced. Now, they also then attack each adjacent unit. So if they were like totally surrounded, they would not only get their initial attack, but then their special attack and then an additional attack. But it does say, though, if there was any adjacent units for that second attack, it does say that, but the CF then reduced by an additional -1. So they're not, that secondary attack they do isn't quite strong. Also, and I forgot to do this too, so many things to remember, that when a Colossi wins an adjacent combat and damages something like paralyze them or stun them, that unit has to retreat. So we want to make sure we retreat the paralyzed unit that we hit. Alright, so don't forget that. So we're going to go back and make sure we retreat the unit and then figure out which unit gets attacked by this special boulder sling attack. Alright, try to position the camera a little bit so we can see everything. So first of all, before I forget again, I retreat that miner. I just moved him south, so he's now no longer next to this Colossi. That also has a boulder sling. So the Greystones, if I'm reading that right, they also have the boulder sling, and it looks like some of their other parts have a different attack. That's actually okay because this building now blocks line of sight. So instead of attacking this miner again, when he does his special attack, he's probably going to attack this marine unit here. Whereas this Whitestone guy is going to attack this marine here. This is also good news because that pushed the paralyzed unit, the miner, out of adjacent reach of the Colossi, so it's not going to get like a whole bunch of attacks. But the bad thing is this Colossi with his boulder sling, like I said, will probably attack here, and then that one attacks here. Let's go ahead and resolve that. Since I'm here, now their boulder attack is 3. So I'm going to just bring the dice roller right here. Let's pull out some of these dice we don't need. Here comes 3 dice. And remember, the Marines defend on a 4, so that's 1 hit. What I'm going to do now is put a stunned. Uh-oh, they got stunned. And we're going to do the same thing for this Greystone. This Greystone, because he's not reduced, he's got 4 dice. And the Marine unit has a defense of 4. So let's see here. 2 hits. Alright, well that paralyzes the Marine. So they throw that big old stack of whatever, rocks, and they get paralyzed. At least they're not reduced. Paralyzed we can work with. That's all the Colossi. So if we look here at our Colossi chart, this is actually pretty useful because sometimes it's a lot of steps to remember. So what you could do is when you determine which Colossi that you're working with, it says like active color move, then the active color does his rolling thunder attack if he's adjacent to someone, and then you do the special attack. So the special attack happens because, as you can see, the special attack isn't always to an adjacent unit. So this is what I do a lot of times just to help me remember is, you know, once we have the active color, I just move the marker up just to remind me, okay, I'm on the rolling thunder, you know, move, rolling thunder, and then do the special action. So you can actually kind of move this through the tracker several times for each Colossi. Well, once we get to the end, it's the end phase. And also to help you out is a handy dandy little sequence of play. And so far I think we're doing pretty good. We're catching everything. The only thing, and I'll just cover this right now so we don't forget, is when you start and you draw, well here, aura, it's actually the aura of the ancestors. There is one thing we didn't talk about because it's not in play, but if you have dust in action, there's actually a roll that you make to move the dust. I didn't mention that before because there's no dust on the board, but just in case someone's watching and they say, well, hey, how come we didn't mention dust? Well, there's going to be some things I don't mention because they're not in play. There's bombers and a bore drill, and you have some spec ops with like a really cool mining drill that they can use to attack these things. So yeah, there's quite a bit that you have at your disposal that we haven't seen yet, and we might not get to. But we're at the end phase. So what do we do there? Now the end phase is just essentially the cleanup phase. If you had an unnecessary marker, like for example the event markers usually last that 1 turn, or it's an instantaneous effect. So I usually clear that in the end phase. Chipped, if for some reason you forgot to remove the chipped off of a Colossi, that would come off as well. Pretty much you're stunned and you're paralyzed. Those are going to stay on the board. Alright, so you just clean up the unnecessary tasks. Then you're going to check to see if victory conditions were met. Generally that means you get all the way to turn 12, and there's a chart that you consult which tells you what your victory conditions is for this scenario. So you would just count up like how many dead Marines, how many Colossi destroyed, if you met objectives, things like that, and you get a score. Or if all your Marines die before the end of turn 12, then you've lost the game. If you killed all the Colossi before the end of turn 12, then that would end the game as well. Doesn't necessarily mean you won, but probably a pretty good chance, because I would still want to check out my, score. Yep, game ends with no Colossi units. Yeah, so there's always the points that you have to take care of. But there you go. Boom, that's turn 1. We're going to go through turn 2 now and just kind of show you then what that's like. But this is the basics of the game. Event, Marines, Colossi. Events, then the aura. Yeah, it's kind of cool. So we'll see how that goes through. Next turn. Hello, friendly game turn marker. We are now on turn 2. And I'm going to bring my phase tracker all the way back up to draw an event. What do we get this time? Ooh, I'm looking through the... Oh, well, then I cover it up. What do we get? Acid Rain. Oh, that's my favorite, actually. I totally did not pick that on purpose. But let's take a look at Acid Rain. Acid Rain, I love it because it says all Colossi tribe units are assumed to start this turn with a chipped away marker on them. So basically they get that defensive modifier of -1. But the thing is, it's only on the top layer of the boulder. So like once I shoot away, or if I shoot away a layer of the boulder, then that status goes away. So basically just their outer skin is affected by the Acid Rain. The other thing I do too is I'll roll a die for each of the gravel that is on the board, and on a roll of 1 through 3, that means the gravel is eliminated from the game. That's awesome. Drawback: the Marines cannot move this turn, so the Acid Rain would be an example of like an event I would keep out for the entire turn, just as a reminder that they can't move. The other thing too that I would do is, since the Marines have did some activations last turn, after I check for this gravel, I'm going to go ahead and prep the Marines for combat, since I know they won't be able to move. Alright, so let's go ahead and prep up the board. Now earlier, let me just shift this over here. Earlier we had the redstone that did the pumice ejection, and he dropped 1 gravel. So I'm going to roll, and on a 1, 2, or 3, the gravel is eliminated, kind of eroded away by the Acid Rain. Awesome. That's great, because again, when we get to the Aura of Ascension, I don't have to flip it over and see what horrible thing it is. So it actually just goes back into my pile of gravel. And I have them in a stack, so I'm just going to stick it on the bottom of the stack. Alright, so now that we've drawn the event, and we had the Acid Rain, and we washed away one of those little gravel things, and we know that the Colossi are hurt, we're actually going to go now and do Marine Recovery. So we'll go see who's wounded, and we're going to check to see how we unparalyze things. In addition, that will be the civilian that we had paralyzed earlier. Alright, so let's heal some people up. So I've identified I have a stunned and I got 2 paralyzed. What you got to do then is decide which one you want to roll for first. It's a die 6 roll. On a successful 5 or 6, you can remove a stunned, flip a paralyzed to a stun, or even flip a reduced unit back to full health, right? The healing technology in the sci-fi 50s universe is really good. Now if we had a medic on the board, we'd also get a bonus to our roll. And now if I'm next to a Colossi unit, then there's a penalty. But if I'm within 2 of or if I'm at 2 hexes of a non-paralyzed medic, I get to roll 2 dice for this and then see what's best. But there's no medic on the board, and nobody is adjacent to a Colossi, so it's just going to be a nice straight up 1d6 roll. So this will be for the stunned unit. Doesn't work. I have the paralyzed Marine unit. Nope. I need a 5 or 6. Then I have the paralyzed miner. Alright, that didn't work either. So unfortunately, they're all still in bad shape. Alright, so what do we do next? Now that we check for Marine Recovery, let's see who we have for reinforcements and where they're going to land. Alright, so turn 2 is going to bring us a scout, a marine, and a heavy weapon. The scout is actually amazing because, again, if we can actually get that successful roll for the recon, then the next turn we'll be able to pick 2 special events and take the one that we like. Marine squad, just another unit that's going to drop in from orbit. We'll figure out where we want to place them. And then we get a heavy weapons team. Their movement's only a 2, but their attack factor is a 5. So that helps. And from this game, every extra dice you can get is really beneficial. So now we got to look at the map and figure out where we want to drop these units in. What makes this tough is that as I start to drop units in, it gets kind of crowded. And I'm going to have, if I drop them in here, there's just going to be a lot of units in the way. There's a combat factor penalty when you shoot through friendly squads. Plus, then they're just closer to Colossi. What I might do is drop some, I'm thinking, on the opposite side here of the Whitestone Colossi. So drop them in here. And the reason I might do that is because these numbers are pretty high. So the chances of landing successfully, like up in here, is really good. Plus then they'll have open shots over here at the Whitestone. So if I can really just bring one of these things down in this turn as a demonstration, I think that'd be cool. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and drop these things. Now remember, there's no penalty going on such as high winds or anything like that. So they're just going to roll 4, 5, and 6 dice. And essentially every 6 that you roll, they successfully land. Now they can't move, but they'll be able to shoot with no penalty. On a 4 or 5, they're scattered. So they're going to land in a hex next to where they're at. And generally it's the lowest numbered hex, as long as it's not on a building or something like that. Now, it can't do anything that turn. So if it doesn't roll a 6, it's going to land close, but it can't move or shoot. Now if I roll a 3 or less, it's a malfunction. I'm going to land on a random spot on the map, and then that's bad. They land disrupted, and they can't move or shoot. So let's do some good rolls here. I'm just going to move our roll cup. Now remember, I'm going to shoot for this row, 514, 515, 516. What I do sometimes is I'm going to preload. So I know I want my scout there, I want a marine here, and I want to try and get the heavy weapon there. So remember, it's 4, 5, 6. So for the scout, we're going to roll 4 dice. And I'm just going to try and keep track of my results. Let's grab all the dice. Okay, so that's bad. I rolled a 4. So they're going to land adjacent in the lowest number hex to them. So the lowest hex number is 513. And I'm going to flip him on his side to remind me that he's got no action this turn. Alright, so then this hex here is 515. So this is for just the regular Marine squad. They got a 6. So remember, they just get to roll all the dice according to the last number of the hex, and then they take the highest result. 6 is a good landing. Then my heavy weapon squad, I really wanted them to land with a high number because I want them to use that weapon this turn. So let's see. Perfect. So just that one scout didn't land very good. So he's not going to move or shoot. However, what's nice is because it's a scout, it didn't say he can't do his action, which would be to, scout and try and get that recon roll. Okay, well good. We have reinforcements. So if we just quickly look at our action chart, the next thing then is the Marine actions, including our civilian. Choices. At this point, it looks like you have a lot of stuff on the board, but it's just real quick decisions. The game actually plays pretty snappy once you get a flow. I know I've got these 2 units here, and we're trying to kill off this white unit. So what we're going to do is roll this group here. Now remember, they have a 4 attack strength, but because they landed this turn, they get -1. So they're only going to be attacking with 3 dice. So if I bring in the dice, And the defense value currently, it just reminds you, on that white Colossi, the white stone, it's 3, but because of the acid rain, it's actually a 2. So I'm going to roll 3 dice, and I need 2s or higher to score hits. Oh my goodness. Okay, now, because it got acid rain, it already is kind of chipped away a bit, but I didn't even score 2 hits, so this was just a complete kerfluffle. Alright, thanks a lot, Marine Squad. So now the Heavy Weapon Squad. Well, they normally have an attack of 5, -1 for the drop, and we need 2s to score hits. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's 2 hits. 1 or 2 successful hits is... I don't remember. Did the other group get a 1 hit? Now I don't remember if he scored 1 hit or not. Oh, the reason why that's important is because 1 or 2 hits, you add that chipped counter. Where did I put my chipped at? Oh, chipped. Well, that's okay. So we'll say the Heavy Weapon Squad, at least they chipped it. But I'm going to continue shooting. So remember, we do have some units here. Stunned can shoot, but they have an additional -1 modifier. That would give it's a Marine Squad, so they get -1 for being stunned. Oh, that's good. They didn't land this turn. So that would bring his dice roll back down to 3. I'm going to set this on top of the white stone. That stack's probably going to fall all over the place. Alright, so here we go. Remember, we need 2 or better. Well, at least 1 keeps the chip status on it. Okay, then I have another Marine unit. It has 4 attack strength. So we'll roll all 4 here, if I can grab all 4 dice carefully. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now that was a result of 4 hits, but you lose all excess hits beyond 3. So even if I scored like 12 hits. So I lose the chipped, and we remove this counter because it was already flipped. Alright, so they're done. Now we're on to the next stack of this Colossi. The acid effect doesn't hurt it. So this here unit shot, that unit was shooting, and I've got 1 more unit down here. It's going to shoot as well. So I'm going to mark it as shooting, and it's going to roll 4 dice because it's a full strength unit. It didn't move. It didn't land this turn. Okay, that's great. What's the defense value? Oh, it's a defense value of 4. Okay, so what would happen is, again, because the acid rain doesn't affect this next layer and it wasn't chipped, 2 hits is just a chip. However, I don't know if I saw this before on any of the other dice rolls, but I just noticed and I'm thinking of it now. 2 6s is a critical hit. Let's see what happens on a critical hit. Okay, so for this critical hit, it's like a Fisher hit. It's either if you're rolling your a natural Marine combat, which is what that was. It wasn't like a special attack from like a bomber or anything like that. Or if you're doing like a chain lightning, which is an event, and you roll 2 natural 6s, you do 1 additional point of damage. So we had 2 6s, that's 2 hits. We add 1 to that. That actually gives us 3 successful hits. So I'm glad I rolled those 2 6s. What that does for us then is we would flip the top unit here. Alright, so unfortunately, even with acid rain, and we got a chip at some point, we just had a hard time bringing down that Colossi. We really did. My other Marine is paralyzed. Now, if you notice here also, if they're paralyzed, they have an attack value of 0, and they have no movement. Stunned, you have no movement, but you can still shoot. So paralyzed, the Marines are done. Okay, so now what do we do when the Marines are done? Now remember, the game picks up in pace, so we're just going to pop over here. We move to Aura of the Ancestors. Like we said earlier, there's no dust currently on the map, so I don't have to move dust. Also, the 1 gravel counter that was out got destroyed by the acid rain, which we still have here as a reminder. So I'm just going to move straight to the Colossi. This is the next card I draw. Colossi, Order of Action. So again, for this particular scenario that I'm doing, there's no tombstones, but we have gray stones. Then we're going to activate the brown stones. Then we're going to activate the red stones, and then we'll activate yellow stones. Which, what do we have? We do have gray, we do have brown, we do have red. There's no yellow, so 3 of our Colossi stacks will move. Well, let's see. Oh, here it says tiebreaker, lowest numbered hex. Alright, let's see where they go. So again, we just pop over here because the action's starting to pick up. Well, that's the thought, right? They're going to move south towards the... Oh, you know what? Yeah, they're paralyzed. They can't move. I was just like, why didn't I move him? Oh, because he's paralyzed. So he moves. Big 50-foot monster. He's like crashing through. And he's like, I'm going to crush the miner. Oh, that's lovely. I get 4 attack dice as a Colossi. And my defense as the miner is a 3. Yeah, this is not looking good. Plus, remember, I get to add 3 more dice because he's got 3 more layers in his stack. So that Colossi is bad. The redstone is terrible because he's got a huge amount. And then my defense as the miner is a 3, right? So every hit over 3, this isn't looking well. So hit, 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 hit. So essentially, since he's paralyzed, he doesn't even flip. He can't take a disruption. So this just one more hit wiped him out. So there goes the mine boss. So he'll never become a major. He'll never become a real boy because he's been perished. Then we activate the BS, which is that boulder sling. See, I remember this time. Do the special attack. The closest marine unit is right here within 5. So they do a CF attack. They don't add anything extra, so it's just 4 dice. Let me get my 4 dice. And again, the defense for the Marines is a 4. So every 4 up is going to do a point of damage potentially. So 1, 2, that's 2 hits. This unit then, because it's already paralyzed, they become disrupted. That would be 1 hit. And then, now that they're paralyzed, disrupted, the second hit removes the Marines. So we're off to a bad start. Then the other part of this BS attack, his Boulder Strike, was he would get 1 more attack on a unit that's adjacent. So you've done enough, Gray Stone. Now we check the Brownstones. The Brownstones move 1. Oh, they're up here. Let's move. And they just move 1 hex here. They move to the lowest number. So 561. Well, they move. What's closest here? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. They're 3 away. So it moves to the lowest number towards the opponent. So this could probably move along the north part of the map. And that's it. Except for he has PD. Alright. We still got to resolve his special attacks. Let's see what PD is real quick. So this Colossi has the PD, which is the pile driver stomp. So it jumps way up into the air and it comes crashing down and it sends out seismic shock waves all around it, damaging units that are near it. So I'm going to pick a unit, all units within 2 hexes, and I pick one and I roll for it. So on a roll of 1 through 2, no effect. On a 3 through 4, I place a stun marker on the target unit, or paralyzed if it's already stunned. 5, I'll place a paralyzed or disrupted if it's already paralyzed. So basically, I'm just adding potentially, 1 step level of damage, right, depending on what I roll. And then 6 would be disrupted or eliminated if it's already disrupted. So why don't we just roll right here and see what we get? Because on the map, I have 1 unit in range, and I'll show you that here in a second based on this roll. So let's see what we get. Oh, great, a 5. Perfect. And 5 says paralyzed. Well, let's see who got paralyzed. Yeah, that's perfect. So this thing jumps way up into the air, comes crashing down. This, fortunately, though, is the only unit within 2 hexes. So they get paralyzed based on our dice roll of 5. That's fantastic. And then, let's see, our card says after the brownstones, we check for the redstones. Now, fortunately, they're just down here, and they're by themselves. So the nearest units are up here. So they're going to move one hex closer. Thank goodness. But because of the special rule, they left the refinery. They leave rubble behind, or gravel. And so now the next time we get that aura of Ascension, they get a thing. Now I got to check for the Medusa Stare. So remember, the Medusa Stare is I roll 1 die 6. That tells me which direction they stare. So even though they didn't attack, they still got their special attacks to resolve. Oh no, a 5. Oh, this is great. So if I look at my compass, 5 is, going back to the left. So if I could, I would shoot my gravel because that's going that way, but can't shoot the gravel. So fortunately, this thing turns and then boom. Now remember, its little pumice ejection happens every odd number turn. So this is an even number turn. It's not going to shoot off any more pumice. That's fantastic. All right, so that would be all of the Colossi that could activate that turn. That's all their special attacks. So we would go to the end turn step. I would go ahead and put away that acid rain event, because that only really happens during the Marine's turn. I don't have any other markers that would need to come off, but then we would just whip it around and start turn 3. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think it like takes longer to explain than it does to actually play. Once you get a rhythm going, it flows very simply, right? Because you start with your event, you then see how that affects the game, you then check for your Marine recovery, and after you do the Marine recovery, you do the reinforcements, if there's a reinforcements on that turn. Then you do the Marine actions, which could be combat or move if they qualify. We didn't do any movement. Now, I did forget 2 things, though, my last turn of Marines. I totally forgot because I got so caught up in the combat. Like, I could still have this guy. He could have shot, because he gets 3 dice. Well, it wouldn't have done much good. What I could have done, now we're talking strategy, post-game strategy. So the scouts, which I totally forgot to do something with, if I had him shoot first before my other Marines did, because he has 3 dice, he loses 1 dice for shooting through a fellow Marine. If I had scored 2 hits, I could have put a chipped on the unit, and then everything else could have fired. And then I had another scout. Well, he couldn't fire, but my other scout that landed awkwardly, okay, he couldn't do any shooting, but I could have rolled him to see if he could have done that recon. But like I said, I just completely forgot about them because the heavy weapons and the other guy, they don't really have a special thing that they do. So when they get paralyzed or they have that bad landing, I just count them as done. So the scout, I completely forgot that he could have done a recon check. So that was a big botch on my end. I also didn't get a chance to move, well, just because I didn't have time. My Marine died, or the miner died. But I could have moved a Marine, or if I had time, I could move a unit up here, which I could then use to move an unlimited amount of spaces on this rail. Currently, at the moment, I don't know how much good that would do me, but it's actually very useful in the future because you have, on your Marines, there's 2 types of movement. So you do have here 3 movement points. Then you have your scouts that have a jump pack. So if you need to move people quickly, they either go by rail to move across the map, or I can do the jump pack. Now the jump pack comes with some danger. You have to roll just almost similar roll to the orbital landing, and that just makes sure that they jump pack and land in the right spot. There's also, what's interesting is there was another attack here we didn't do. So this Blackstone, he also has some really cool, well actually it's just this one here, but it's a tunneler. And when he does his attack and then moves to the special attack, he rolls and he actually pops up in a different location on the map. So even though a lot of these guys only move one, this guy has a chance to pop up next to some of your units, and that would be a nice surprise. There's a lot of other things too that you have. Like I said, we already mentioned the medic, which you can use for healing units. The boring, the drill bit, this has rules for traveling around and killing stuff. You get 2 bombers. They can come in and do like strafing runs. Now, if you have a headquarters unit, and again, I think turn 3 we would have saw our first headquarters squad. What's cool is they can call an Orbital Strike. So they can pinpoint like a unmorphed gravel unit, or they can attack a Colossi with it. And then you have Spec Ops. So Special Operations, they have a driller unit that they would bring in. So there's a lot more depth here than what you're seeing. So I think overall it's not bad. I really actually think this is kind of fun, and once you kind of get a feel for the flow, again, it's not very complicated. The Colossi aren't very complicated to activate. It's just a matter of sometimes remembering, you know, all the things you have to do. But that's just like any other game. And then if you realize you make a mistake, as you can see, even though I forgot a couple of steps, it wasn't difficult to go back and like, oh, let me just quickly resolve, you know, let me resolve their special attack. Or, you know, if I wanted to, I could go back now that I'm talking, you know, strategy and saying to myself, oh, I completely forgot about my scout. I could probably go ahead and roll the scout if I wanted to. That's the beautiful thing about a solo game, right? You can catch mistakes, go back and fix it. And this is actually a very fun solo fixable game, as you can see. Like I said, once you get the flow down, it moves fairly quickly. And either A, you're going to start losing some Marines rather quickly, which speeds things up, or you can start shooting down some of the weaker Colossi. And that's part of the strategy too, is where do I drop the Marines so that they're supporting each other and not shooting across each other for the combat penalties. And when I talk about solo games, this is one of the things that's enjoyable about this one, is the fact that you have a lot of decision points. So it's not just a fixed flow chart of things that happen. The Colossi are a little bit scripted, but as far as the control of the Marine forces, you really do have complete control over what they do, where they attempt to land. And even those random landings aren't terrible, but they do throw a wrench in every now and then as to what can happen. So this gives you some plenty of choices, like where do I start my attacks? Which Colossi do I try and drop first? Because that would be my one suggestion, is just really try to surround one and just shoot it, shoot it, shoot it. Keep an eye out for how close the other Colossi are getting, and if you need to, do a scoot and shoot, where you move, you suffer a combat penalty, but at least you can keep some distance between you, the different Colossi, and still try and shoot stuff down. So again, a game full of flavor, a game full of decisions that you have to make. So I hope that this gives you a pretty good idea of how the game plays. So if you enjoy it, you know, just drop a comment. Let me know what you think of it. And I hope to see you around for the next playthrough of whatever we pick. So see you later. Thanks.